Commander Sarah Chen stared at the holographic display showing the Kepler Defense Fleet's latest casualty reports. 12 ships lost in the past month. 12 crews that would never return home. The brass back on Earth had finally decided to send reinforcements. But what they sent made her stomach turn. Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez stepped onto the bridge of the UES Valiant, her polished boots clicking against the metal deck plating. At 24, she looked even younger than her age suggested. Her dark hair was pulled back in regulation style, and her uniform still held the crisp creases of someone fresh from the academy. The bridge crew exchanged glances as she approached Chen's command chair. "Commander Chen, Lieutenant Rodriguez reporting for duty as your new tactical officer," Maya said. Her voice steady despite the obvious tension in the room. Chen looked up from her reports and studied the young woman before her. According to the files, Rodriguez had graduated top of her class in theoretical combat scenarios but had zero real combat experience. The academy instructors praised her innovative thinking, but theory and reality were two very different beasts in space warfare. "Welcome aboard, Lieutenant. I trust you've reviewed our current situation?" Chen asked, gesturing to the tactical display showing enemy positions throughout the Kepler system. "Yes, ma'am. The Zephyrian Empire has established a blockade around the outer planets and is systematically destroying our supply lines. Their quantum shielding technology makes conventional weapons largely ineffective, and their phase cannons can punch through our armor like tissue paper," Rodriguez replied, her eyes already analyzing the display. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Webb, a grizzled veteran with 30 years of service, couldn't hide his skepticism. "Book learning is one thing, Lieutenant. Out here, the Zephyrians don't follow Academy protocols. They're ruthless, and they've been winning this war for good reason." Rodriguez nodded respectfully. "I understand your concerns, Chief. I know my record shows no combat experience, and I know that makes me a liability in your eyes. But I'm here to learn and to serve. I won't let you down." The bridge's communication array crackled to life. "All ships, this is Admiral Reeves aboard the UES Titan. We've detected a Zephyrian patrol group moving toward mining station Omega-7. 3 heavy cruisers and a destroyer escort. The Valiant and Phoenix will intercept. Standard engagement protocols." Chen felt her jaw tighten. Standard protocols meant another likely disaster. The Zephyrians had adapted to every conventional tactic the fleet had tried. Their ships were faster, better armed, and commanded by veterans who had been fighting this war for 5 years. "Lieutenant, take your station. Let's see what that academy training taught you," Chen ordered. Rodriguez moved to the tactical console, her fingers dancing across the holographic controls with surprising confidence. She pulled up the enemy formation data and began running calculations. Something in her expression changed as she studied the patterns. "Commander, I'm seeing something unusual in their approach vector," Rodriguez said. "They're maintaining a tight formation, but their lead cruiser is running point defense sweeps every 47 seconds. That's not random." Webb leaned over her shoulder, studying the data. "Could be scanning for mines or stealth ships." "No, sir. The timing is too precise. It's like they're following a predetermined pattern, not responding to actual threats. What if their quantum shielding has a vulnerability we haven't considered?" Chen moved closer to the tactical station. In the past year, she had watched too many good officers die because they underestimated the enemy. But something in Rodriguez's analysis sparked her interest. "Explain your thinking, Lieutenant." Rodriguez's fingers flew over the controls, bringing up theoretical models and combat simulations. "The quantum shielding works by creating interference patterns that disrupt incoming energy. But interference patterns have nodes, points where the waves cancel each other out. If we could time our attacks to coincide with their scanning cycles—" "You're talking about microsecond timing across multiple ships," Webb interrupted. "Even if you're right, it's impossible to coordinate that precisely in combat." "Not impossible, Chief. Difficult, but not impossible. The Valiant's new quantum processors can calculate firing solutions in real time. We could link with the Phoenix and synchronize our attack patterns." Chen studied the young lieutenant. There was something different about her approach. Where veteran officers saw established patterns and proven tactics, Rodriguez saw possibilities and untested theories. It was either brilliant or suicidal. "The risk is enormous, Lieutenant. If you're wrong, we lose 2 ships instead of fighting a conventional engagement we might survive." Rodriguez met her commander's gaze. "Ma'am, conventional engagements against the Zephyrians have a 12% survival rate based on our recent encounters. My calculations suggest this approach could improve our odds to 63%. The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of the ship's systems. Chen weighed the options: follow standard protocols and likely join the growing list of casualties, or trust an untested theory from an officer who had never fired a shot in anger. "Chief Webb, how long until we reach engagement range?" Chen asked. 18 minutes, Commander." Chen turned back to Rodriguez. "You have 15 minutes to prove your theory works. Run full simulations with combat parameters. If the computer models support your calculations, we'll try it." Rodriguez's face lit up with determination. "Yes, ma'am." Initiating combat simulations now. As the Valiant raced toward its destiny, Rodriguez worked with an intensity that surprised even herself. The Academy had taught her the science of warfare, but this was her first chance to apply that knowledge where lives hung in the balance. She ran simulation after simulation, refining her calculations and adjusting for every variable she could imagine. The bridge crew watched with a mixture of curiosity and concern as the young lieutenant pushed the ship's computers to their limits. Webb found himself hoping she was right, even as his experience told him to expect the worst. "Simulation complete, Commander," Rodriguez announced. "Computer models confirm the theory. If we can maintain precise timing and coordinate with the Phoenix, we have a real chance." Chen looked at the results, then at her crew. They were about to bet everything on the untested theories of a rookie officer. In any other circumstance, it would be madness. But these weren't ordinary circumstances, and conventional wisdom had already failed them too many times. "All hands. This is the commander. We're about to try something new. Trust your training. Trust each other. And let's show these Zephyrians what human ingenuity can accomplish." The die was cast. In 3 minutes, they would either prove that innovation could triumph over experience, or they would become another footnote in the war's growing casualty reports. The Zephyrian heavy cruiser ZNS Shadowbane cut through space like a predator stalking its prey. Captain Vextar stood on his command bridge, his reptilian features twisted in satisfaction as he reviewed the human fleet's pathetic response to their latest offensive. The mammals had sent only 2 ships to defend their mining station. It would be another easy victory. "Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, reported his sensor officer. 2 human vessels approaching. Configuration matches destroyer-class ships Valiant and Phoenix." Vextar's forked tongue flicked out in amusement. "Only 2 ships? The humans must be more desperate than our intelligence suggested. Maintain formation. We'll crush them as we have all the others." Aboard the Valiant, Rodriguez's hands moved steadily across her console despite the sweat beading on her forehead. The enemy ships were now visible on the main display, their sleek forms bristling with weapons that had torn apart. Dozens of human vessels. "Phoenix confirms ready status," reported Communications Officer Liu. "They're synchronized to our targeting system. Enemy vessels are charging weapons," Rodriguez announced, her voice remaining steady. "Quantum shielding at full strength. Beginning pattern analysis now." Chen watched the tactical display as the 4 Zephyrian ships maintained their tight formation. Everything depended on Rodriguez's theory being correct. If the quantum shielding operated on predictable cycles, they might have a chance. If not, they would be dead in minutes. "I'm reading the scanning pattern," Rodriguez said, her eyes locked on her displays. "Every 47 seconds, exactly as predicted. The interference nodes are shifting, but the timing remains constant." Chief Webb monitored the ship's weapon systems. All batteries charged and ready. Targeting computers linked with Phoenix. "We'll only get 1 shot at this, Lieutenant." Rodriguez nodded, her academy training taking over. She had run this scenario 1,000 times in simulation. But facing real enemy ships with real weapons was entirely different. The lives of both crews depended on her calculations being perfect. "Zephyrian formation is adjusting," she reported. "They're moving into attack position. Standard tactics would have them focus fire on the lead ship." "That would be us," Chen observed grimly. "Not if they can't target us effectively. Commander, request permission to execute the synchronized strike." Chen looked around her bridge. Every face showed the strain of the moment. They were about to attempt something that had never been tried in actual combat, based on the theories of an officer who had never faced the enemy before. "All stations report ready," Chief Webb announced. "Zephyrian ships are powering weapons," Liu added. "Phase cannons charging." Chen made her decision. "Execute the attack, Lieutenant. Show us what you've learned." Rodriguez's fingers flew over her controls, initiating synchronized firing sequence. Phoenix confirms lock, calculating optimal timing. Mark in 5, 4, 3, 2, mark. The Valiant and Phoenix fired simultaneously, their particle beams precisely timed to strike during the calculated vulnerability window in the Zephyrian quantum shielding. For a heartbeat, space lit up with brilliant energy as human weapons met alien defenses. The lead Zephyrian cruiser shuddered as the coordinated beams punched through its shields and tore into its hull. Explosions blossomed along its port side as secondary systems overloaded. The impossible had happened. Human weapons had penetrated Zephyrian defenses. Direct hit, Webb shouted. We're reading massive damage to their lead ship. Vextar stared in shock at his damage reports. The Shadowbane's quantum shielding had failed completely for exactly 2.3 seconds, allowing the human weapons to strike with full force. It was impossible. Human technology couldn't penetrate their defenses. Report, he snarled at his tactical officer. Unknown weapon type, Captain. Our shields registered total failure across all frequencies simultaneously. It shouldn't be possible with their primitive technology. Damage assessment? Severe. Primary weapons offline. Life support compromised in sections 7 through 12. We're combat ineffective. Vextar's eyes narrowed. Somehow the humans had found a weakness they didn't even know existed. Signal the fleet. All ships target the lead human vessel. Destroy them before they can repeat this attack. Aboard the Valiant, Rodriguez was already adjusting her calculations for a second strike. Commander, the lead ship is disabled, but the other three are breaking formation. They're adapting faster than expected. Can you replicate the attack? Chen asked. Working on it, but they're changing their scanning patterns. I need 30 seconds to recalculate the interference nodes. We don't have 30 seconds, Webb warned. Enemy ships are targeting us. Incoming fire! The Zephyrian destroyers opened fire with everything they had. Phase cannon blasts streaked toward the Valiant as Chen ordered evasive maneuvers. The ship rolled and dove, but one blast clipped their starboard side, sending shockwaves through the hull. Shields down to 60%, reported the engineering station. Minor hull breach on deck 4. Rodriguez continued working frantically at her console, trying to find the new pattern in the enemy's defensive systems. The Zephyrians were clearly adapting, but their quantum technology still operated on fundamental principles that couldn't be changed instantly. Got it, she announced. New firing solution calculated. But they're spreading out. We can only target one ship at a time now. Phoenix is taking heavy fire, Liu reported. They're requesting immediate support. Chen saw their sister ship on the display, surrounded by energy blasts as it tried desperately to evade the Zephyrian attack. The enemy had learned from the first exchange and was pressing their advantage while the humans couldn't repeat their surprise attack. Target the nearest destroyer, Chen ordered. Fire when ready. Rodriguez locked onto the second Zephyrian ship and fired another precisely timed shot. Once again, human weapons penetrated the quantum shielding, but this time the enemy ship was ready. It had already begun evasive maneuvers when its shields failed, and the particle beam only grazed its hull. Minor damage to target 2, Webb reported. They're learning our timing. The battle was turning against them. The initial surprise had worked perfectly, but now the Zephyrians understood they were facing a new threat. Their superior numbers and firepower were beginning to tell as they adapted their tactics to counter the human innovation. Commander, Phoenix reports critical damage, Liu announced. They're losing power to weapons and propulsion. Rodriguez stared at her tactical display, watching as the enemy ships maneuvered to finish off the damaged Phoenix. Her brilliant theory had given them one perfect moment, but it wasn't enough. The Zephyrians were too experienced, too adaptable. Then she noticed something. The damaged lead cruiser was still transmitting data to the other ships, coordinating their movements and sharing tactical information. If she could disrupt that coordination... Commander, I have an idea, Rodriguez said, her voice tight with concentration. What if we don't target their ships? What if we target their communications? Chen looked at her tactical officer with new respect. Even under fire, even facing defeat, the young lieutenant was still thinking, still innovating. Explain quickly. If I can time our shots to disrupt their quantum communication array during a shield fluctuation, we might be able to cut their coordination link. Without real-time tactical data, they'll have to rely on individual ship sensors. It was another untested theory, another desperate gamble, but it was also their only chance to save the Phoenix and complete their mission. Do it, Chen ordered. Rodriguez began calculating a new type of attack, one that would target the enemy's greatest strength, their ability to fight as a coordinated unit. The Academy had taught her that wars weren't won by superior firepower alone, but by superior thinking. She was about to put that lesson to the ultimate test. Rodriguez's fingers moved with desperate precision across her tactical console. The Phoenix was dying before her eyes, its hull breached in 3 places while Zephyrian destroyers closed in for the kill. She had seconds to make her communication disruption theory work, or they would lose their sister ship and probably their own lives. "Targeting quantum communication node on the damaged cruiser," she announced. "If I can hit it during their next shield cycle, it should create a cascade failure in their tactical network." Chief Webb watched the enemy formation on his display. "That's a hell of a small target, Lieutenant. You're talking about hitting an antenna array that's maybe 10 meters wide on a ship that's moving at combat speed." "I know the odds, Chief, but it's our only shot." Commander Chen gripped her command chair as another Zephyrian blast shook the Valiant. "Phoenix has lost main engines. They're sitting ducks out there." On the main screen, the Phoenix drifted helplessly as the 2 Zephyrian destroyers moved in for the final strike. Captain Morrison's ship had served the fleet for 8 years, and Chen wasn't about to watch it die because some admiral back on Earth thought they could win this war with conventional tactics. "Firing solution locked," Rodriguez reported. "Waiting for shield fluctuation. Now." The Valiant's main particle cannon fired a precisely focused beam at the Shadowbane's communication array. The shot was so accurate that it passed between the ship's defensive turrets and struck the quantum transmitter at exactly the moment the shields cycled down for their scanning routine. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Zephyrian communication node exploded in a cascade of quantum feedback that rippled through their entire tactical network. Suddenly, the 3 remaining enemy ships found themselves cut off from each other, unable to coordinate their attacks or share targeting data. "Direct hit on communication array," Webb shouted. "I'm reading massive disruption in their tactical grid." Captain Vextar watched in horror as his bridge displays flickered and died. The quantum communication system that linked his task force had been completely destroyed by a single precise shot. His remaining ships were now operating independently, without the coordination that made Zephyrian fleet tactics so effective. "Restore communications immediately," he ordered. "Impossible, Captain. The quantum resonance cascade has burned out our entire communication array. We'll need to return to base for repairs." Vextar slammed his fist against his command chair. These humans were fighting like nothing he had ever encountered. They weren't just using new weapons, they were thinking in completely different ways. Every assumption he had made about their capabilities was proving wrong. Aboard the Valiant, Rodriguez was already adapting to the new tactical situation. With the enemy ships operating independently, their coordinated attack patterns had broken down. The destroyers were still dangerous, but they were no longer fighting as a unified force. "Enemy formation is breaking up," she reported. "They're having trouble coordinating without their communication link." "Phoenix is signaling," Communications Officer Liu announced. "They've restored partial power to weapons, but they're still dead in space." Chen studied the tactical display. The 3 remaining Zephyrian ships were spreading out, each captain now making individual decisions about how to proceed. It was the opening they needed, but they had to act fast before the enemy adapted to the new situation. "Lieutenant, can you target their individual shield generators now that they're separated?" Rodriguez ran quick calculations on her console. "Affirmative. Without coordinated shielding, each ship is vulnerable during its own scanning cycle. I can target them one at a time." "Do it. Chief Webb, coordinate with Phoenix for supporting fire." The next few minutes became a deadly dance of precise timing and desperate maneuvering. Rodriguez tracked each enemy ship's individual shield pattern, while Chen maneuvered the Valiant to avoid incoming fire. The young tactical officer's shots were surgical in their precision, each one timed to exploit the microsecond vulnerabilities in the Zephyrian defenses. The first destroyer took a direct hit to its main reactor housing. The ship didn't explode, but it lost primary power and drifted helplessly as its crew struggled to prevent a complete meltdown. The second destroyer, seeing its sister ship disabled, began an immediate retreat toward the edge of the system. Captain Vextar found himself alone, his heavy cruiser damaged, and his escorts either destroyed or fleeing. The humans had done the impossible. They had defeated a superior Zephyrian force using nothing but innovation and precise timing. "Captain, recommend immediate withdrawal," his tactical officer advised. We're outnumbered and our tactical advantage has been neutralized. Vextar studied the human ships on his display. The Phoenix was still badly damaged, but the Valiant showed minimal battle damage despite taking several hits. Whatever technology they were using, it had given them capabilities his intelligence reports had never mentioned. Signal retreat, he ordered reluctantly. All ships withdraw to rallying point 7. The Shadowbane turned away from the battle, its engines straining to escape before the humans could target it again. The Zephyrian Empire had suffered its first major tactical defeat in over 2 years, and it had been delivered by an inexperienced human officer using untested theories. Enemy ships are withdrawing, Rodriguez reported, her voice shaking slightly as the adrenaline began to wear off. All targets are either disabled or retreating. Chief Webb stared at his console in amazement. I've been fighting these lizards for 3 years, and I've never seen anything like that. You actually did it, Lieutenant. You found a way to beat their defenses. Chen stood and walked over to Rodriguez's station. The young officer was still running diagnostics, making sure every system was operating correctly. Her hands were steady, but Chen could see the stress in her eyes. Outstanding work, Lieutenant. That was some of the finest tactical thinking I've ever witnessed. Rodriguez looked up at her commander. Thank you, ma'am. But this was just one engagement. They'll adapt to our tactics now. We'll need to find new ways to fight them. Phoenix is signaling again, Liu announced. Captain Morrison wants to know what the hell we just did to those Zephyrian ships. Chen smiled grimly. Tell Captain Morrison that we just discovered the difference between fighting by the book and writing a new one. As the Valiant moved to assist the damaged Phoenix, Rodriguez continued analyzing the battle data. She had proven that human innovation could overcome superior technology, but she also knew this victory would bring new challenges. The Zephyrians would study this engagement and develop countermeasures. The war was far from over. In fact, Rodriguez suspected it was about to become much more complicated. The enemy now knew that humanity possessed weapons and tactics they hadn't anticipated. They would respond with their own innovations, and the conflict would escalate to new levels of sophistication. But for now, 2 human ships were returning home instead of joining the casualty lists. Mining Station Omega-7 was safe, and the Kepler defense fleet had scored its first major victory in months. Sometimes, Rodriguez reflected, that was enough. The reports had labeled her inexperienced. They were right. She had been inexperienced. But experience was something that could be gained quickly in wartime, and she was learning fast. The Zephyrians had just taught her that innovation was humanity's greatest weapon. She intended to use that lesson well in the battles to come. 3 weeks after the engagement at Omega-7, the Kepler Defense Fleet headquarters buzzed with unprecedented activity. Admiral Reeves stood in the main briefing room, studying holographic displays that showed Zephyrian fleet movements across 12 star systems. The enemy was repositioning their forces in response to the new human tactics, and their response was larger than anyone had anticipated. They're bringing in their 3rd battle fleet, reported Intelligence Officer Commander Parks. That's 47 ships, including their newest heavy cruisers. They're not taking any chances after what happened at Omega-7. Rodriguez sat at the tactical planning table, surrounded by senior officers who had initially dismissed her as an academy theorist. Now they hung on her every word as she analyzed the enemy's new formations and defensive modifications. They've upgraded their quantum communication systems, she observed, pointing to the tactical displays. New redundant networks and hardened transmission nodes. They're also running randomized shield patterns to prevent timing attacks. Captain Morris from the UES Endeavour leaned forward. So your breakthrough tactics won't work anymore? Not the same way, Rodriguez admitted. But they've made a crucial mistake in their adaptations. By randomizing their shield patterns, they've created micro-variations in power distribution. We can exploit those variations if we approach the problem differently. Admiral Reeves studied the young lieutenant who had become the fleet's most valuable tactical asset. What do you have in mind, Lieutenant? Rodriguez stood and activated a new holographic model. Instead of timing our attacks to their shield cycles, we synchronize multiple ships to create resonance cascades in their quantum fields. It requires precise coordination between at least 6 vessels, but it could overload their entire defensive grid. The room fell silent as the senior officers studied her proposal. What Rodriguez was suggesting would require split-second timing across multiple ships engaged in high-speed combat. The margin for error was virtually non-existent. "The risk is enormous," Commander Chen observed. "If even one ship is off by a few milliseconds, the entire formation could be caught in a crossfire." "Yes, ma'am. But if it works, we could disable entire Zephyrian squadrons with a single coordinated strike. Given their numerical advantage, it might be our only chance to even the odds." Admiral Reeves looked around the table at his senior staff. The traditional naval officers were clearly uncomfortable with Rodriguez's radical proposals, but they couldn't argue with her results. The victory at Omega-7 had been their first major success in months. "How long would you need to train the fleet in these new tactics?" he asked. 2 weeks for basic coordination, sir. But the Zephyrians will be here in 10 days based on current projections. Chief of Staff Captain Williams spoke up. "Admiral, we're talking about risking our entire fleet on untested tactics developed by an officer with exactly one combat engagement on her record." Rodriguez felt the familiar sting of doubt from the senior officers, but this time it was tempered by respect for what she had already accomplished. "Captain Williams is right to be concerned," she said calmly. "But conventional tactics have resulted in a 78% casualty rate against Zephyrian forces. At those odds, we lose this war regardless." Admiral Reeves made his decision. "We'll implement your training program, Lieutenant, but I want fail-safes built into every engagement plan. If the coordinated tactics don't work, our ships need to be able to break off and fight conventionally." "Understood, sir. I'll begin working with the fleet's tactical officers immediately." The next 8 days became a blur of intense preparation. Rodriguez worked 18-hour shifts, training ship captains and tactical officers in the precise timing required for her new coordination attacks. The simulations showed promising results, but simulations couldn't account for the chaos and stress of actual combat. Commander Chen watched Rodriguez push herself to exhaustion as she refined the tactics. "Lieutenant, when was the last time you slept?" "Sleep is a luxury we can't afford right now, ma'am. The Zephyrians will be here soon and our people need to be ready. They need you to be ready too. You're no good to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion." Rodriguez looked up from her tactical displays, her eyes red from fatigue. "I keep thinking about all the ships we've lost, all the crews that died because we couldn't adapt fast enough. If my calculations are wrong, if I've missed something." Chen sat down beside her tactical officer. "Maya, you've already saved more lives than most officers save in their entire careers. But you can't win this war single-handedly. Trust your training, trust your team, and trust that you've done everything possible to prepare them." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent alert from the communications center. "All senior staff to the command center immediately. Priority Alpha alert." In the command center, the main display showed the approaching Zephyrian fleet in all its terrifying glory. 47 ships arranged in a battle formation that stretched across millions of kilometers. At the center of the formation were 3 massive dreadnoughts that intelligence had never seen before. "They've brought their newest ships," Admiral Reeves observed grimly. "Those dreadnoughts are twice the size of anything we've encountered." Rodriguez studied the enemy formation with growing concern. The Zephyrians had clearly learned from their defeat at Omega-7. Their ships were arranged in overlapping defensive patterns that would make coordinated attacks extremely difficult. "They're using rotating formations," she noted. "Each ship group is on a different timing cycle. Even if we could penetrate one group's defenses, the others would still be coordinated and effective." "So what do we do?" asked Captain Williams. Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment, running calculations in her head. The enemy had adapted brilliantly to counter her previous tactics. They had anticipated every obvious response and prepared countermeasures accordingly. But that might be their weakness. "Admiral, they've prepared for us to attack their defenses," she said slowly. "But what if we don't attack their ships at all?" "Explain." Rodriguez walked to the display and highlighted the massive Zephyrian formation. "They're using quantum communication to coordinate all 47 ships in real time. That requires enormous amounts of processing power and generates massive quantum signatures. What if we overload their communication network instead of attacking individual ships?" Admiral Reeves studied the display. "You're talking about attacking their entire fleet's nervous system." "Exactly. One precisely coordinated electromagnetic pulse at the right frequency could crash their entire tactical network. Without coordination, 47 ships become 47 individual targets. The audacity of the plan was staggering. Rodriguez was proposing to attack the enemy's greatest strength, their coordination. and turn it into their greatest weakness. But it would require perfect execution from every ship in the human fleet. The timing would have to be absolutely perfect, Commander Chen observed. Even a second's delay could allow them to adapt. Which is why we'll only get one chance, Rodriguez replied. If it fails, we fight a conventional battle against impossible odds. If it succeeds, we might just save the Kepler system. Admiral Reeves looked around the room at his officers. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing the most advanced fleet the Zephyrian Empire had ever assembled. Conventional tactics would result in their complete destruction. Prepare your attack plan, Lieutenant. We'll stake everything on one perfect moment. Rodriguez nodded, already calculating the precise requirements for an attack that would either save humanity's foothold in the Kepler system or destroy it completely. The reports had once labeled her inexperienced, but she was about to attempt something no experienced officer would dare try. She was going to attack an entire enemy fleet with nothing but mathematics and human ingenuity. The human fleet spread across the Kepler system in a formation that would have been impossible to coordinate just months earlier. 18 ships arranged in a complex three-dimensional pattern, each vessel positioned at precisely calculated distances to create the electromagnetic resonance Rodriguez needed for her attack. Commander Chen stood on the bridge of the Valiant, watching her tactical officer make final adjustments to the coordination matrix. Rodriguez had barely slept in 3 days, surviving on stimulants and determination, as she refined her calculations to account for every variable. Fleet reports ready status, announced communications. Officer Liu. All ships are in position and synchronized. To your targeting system. Rodriguez studied the massive Zephyrian formation on her displays. The enemy fleet had arranged itself in concentric defensive rings around their 3 new dreadnoughts. It was a formation designed to maximize their coordinated firepower while minimizing vulnerabilities to the timing attacks humans had used before. Their communication network is handling approximately 4.7 million data transactions per second, she reported. That's enough coordination bandwidth to manage tactical data for over 100 ships. They're running far above capacity to ensure perfect synchronization. Chief Webb monitored the approaching enemy vessels. They'll be in weapons range in 12 minutes. If we're going to do this, it has to be soon. Rodriguez nodded, her fingers dancing across her controls as she made final calculations. The electromagnetic pulse had to be timed perfectly to coincide with peak communication traffic in the Zephyrian network. Too early or too late and the attack would fail completely. Admiral Reeves is signaling, Liu announced. He's requesting confirmation of attack readiness. Chen looked at her tactical officer. Rodriguez was pale with exhaustion, but her eyes were focused with absolute determination. The young lieutenant had become the fleet's greatest weapon, but she was also carrying an impossible burden of responsibility. Are you ready, Maya? Rodriguez took a deep breath. As ready as I'll ever be, ma'am. Initiating final targeting sequence now. Across the fleet, 18 ships aligned their electromagnetic projectors with microscopic precision. The attack would require every vessel to fire simultaneously, creating a focused pulse that could penetrate the Zephyrian communication network's quantum encryption. Aboard the Zephyrian dreadnought Void Render, Fleet Admiral Kethvar watched the human formation with growing puzzlement. The enemy ships were positioned in a strange pattern that made no tactical sense. They were too spread out to concentrate their firepower, and their formation offered no obvious defensive advantages. Analysis of human positioning? He demanded. Unknown tactical doctrine, Admiral. They appear to be using some form of experimental formation. Our tactical computers cannot identify the pattern or predict their likely attack vectors. Kethvar studied the display more carefully. The humans had surprised them once with innovative tactics. He would not underestimate them again. Increase communication bandwidth to maximum. I want real-time coordination between all ships. If they attempt another surprise attack, we'll be ready. The decision to maximize communication traffic was exactly what Rodriguez had hoped for. Her instruments detected the massive increase in quantum data transmission across the Zephyrian fleet. Their network was now operating at 97% of theoretical capacity. Peak traffic achieved, she announced. All fleet units report targeting lock. Requesting permission to fire. Chen opened a channel to Admiral Reeves. Admiral, Valiant reports ready for coordinated strike. Permission granted, came the immediate reply. All ships execute Rodriguez protocol on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. 18 human ships fired simultaneously, their electromagnetic projectors creating a focused pulse that raced across space at the speed of light. The pulse was invisible to conventional sensors, but its effects on the Zephyrian quantum communication network were immediate and catastrophic. The Benham electromagnetic wave struck the enemy fleet's communication grid at precisely the moment of peak data traffic. The carefully synchronized quantum channels that coordinated 47 ships suddenly found themselves flooded with interference patterns that corrupted every transmission simultaneously. Fleet Admiral Kethvar watched in horror as every display on his command bridge flickered and died. The quantum communication system that linked his massive fleet had been completely overwhelmed by a single coordinated pulse. 47 ships that had been operating as one perfect unit were suddenly isolated and alone. "Report," he snarled at his communications officer. "Total network failure, Admiral. The quantum resonance cascade has burned out communication relays across the entire fleet. We're completely cut off from all other ships." "How long for repairs?" "At least 6 hours, sir. The humans somehow managed to corrupt our quantum encryption protocols. We'll need to completely rebuild the network from scratch." Kethvar stared at the tactical display showing his own ship's sensors. Without the fleet coordination network, he couldn't see the positions of his other vessels or coordinate their movements. Each captain would have to fight independently, without the tactical advantages that made Zephyrian fleets so effective. Aboard the Valiant, Rodriguez watched her instruments with growing excitement. "Direct hit on the communication network. I'm reading total coordination failure across their entire fleet." "Confirm that, Lieutenant," Chen ordered. "Confirmed, ma'am. No quantum communication traffic detected from any enemy vessel. They're operating on individual ship sensors only." Chief Webb studied the enemy formation on his display. Already the precise Zephyrian battle lines were beginning to waver as individual captains lost track of their fleet's overall positioning. "They're breaking formation. Without coordination, they can't maintain their defensive patterns." Chen opened a fleet-wide channel. "All ships, this is Commander Chen. The coordination attack was successful. Enemy fleet is operating without tactical coordination. Begin individual engagement protocols." The battle that followed was unlike anything in the history of space warfare. 47 Zephyrian ships found themselves fighting 18 human vessels. But without their coordination advantage, the numbers became meaningless. Individual Zephyrian captains made decisions based on limited sensor data, often contradicting the actions of nearby ships. Rodriguez coordinated the human attack with surgical precision, directing each ship to exploit the confusion in the enemy formation. The Valiant and its squadron mates moved through the Zephyrian fleet like wolves among sheep, targeting isolated vessels and preventing them from regrouping. Enemy dreadnought Void Render is attempting to signal the fleet with light-based communications, Clue reported. "Too slow and too limited," Rodriguez replied. "Light-speed signals can't coordinate a fleet in real-time combat. By the time their messages reach other ships, the tactical situation has already changed." The first Zephyrian ship to fall was a heavy cruiser that found itself surrounded by 3 human destroyers. Without coordination with nearby vessels, it fought alone against impossible odds and was quickly disabled. The second ship fell to a concentrated attack that it couldn't call for help against. Admiral Kethvar watched his fleet disintegrate ship by ship. The humans were using tactics he had never seen before, attacking with a coordination that his isolated vessels couldn't match. Individual Zephyrian ships were superior to human vessels, but without fleet coordination, they were fighting at a terrible disadvantage. "Signal general retreat," he ordered. "All ships withdraw to rallying point 12. But without quantum communication, the retreat order had to be transmitted by conventional means. Only ships within direct line of sight received the message immediately. Others had to wait for courier drones or light-speed transmissions, and by then, the tactical situation had changed again. Rodriguez watched the enemy fleet's attempted retreat with professional satisfaction. They're trying to withdraw, but they can't coordinate the movement. Ships are retreating individually instead of as a unit. That makes them vulnerable to pursuit, Chen observed. Exactly. Without coordination, they can't provide mutual cover during withdrawal. We can pick them off one by one. The Battle of Kepler lasted 4 hours and resulted in the most decisive human victory since the war began. 23 Zephyrian ships were destroyed or disabled, including one of the massive new dreadnoughts. The remaining enemy vessels fled the system in complete disarray, unable to coordinate their retreat or provide mutual support. The human fleet suffered only minor damage, with no ships lost and minimal casualties. Rodriguez's electromagnetic attack had turned a hopeless battle against superior numbers into a complete tactical victory. As the Valiant limped back to port for repairs, Rodriguez finally allowed herself to rest. She had proven that human innovation could overcome any technological advantage, but she also knew the war was far from over. The Zephyrians would adapt to this defeat just as they had adapted to her previous victories. "Outstanding work, Lieutenant," Chen said as she reviewed the battle reports. "You've just rewritten the textbook on space warfare." Rodriguez looked out at the stars, thinking about the enemy ships that had escaped. "Thank you, ma'am. But they'll be back and they'll be ready for our coordination attacks next time. Then we'll have to think of something new." 6 months after the Battle of Kepler, Lieutenant Commander Maya Rodriguez stood in the war room of the newly constructed Titan station, studying holographic displays that showed the current state of the conflict. The war had changed dramatically since her electromagnetic coordination attack, and not entirely in ways she had anticipated. The Zephyrians have completely restructured their fleet doctrine, reported Intelligence Chief Commander Parks. They're no longer using centralized coordination. Instead, they've adopted a cellular command structure with autonomous squadron leaders. Admiral Reeves studied the new enemy formations with concern. "Show me the tactical implications." Rodriguez manipulated the holographic display highlighting the enemy's new approach. Each Zephyrian squadron now operates independently with pre-programmed objectives. They can't be disrupted by communication attacks because they're not communicating during combat. It's actually a very effective adaptation. "Effective enough to counter your coordination tactics?" Admiral Reeves asked. "More than effective," Rodriguez admitted. "Our recent engagements have shown that autonomous squadrons are much harder to predict and counter. They're essentially fighting the way we fight now, with individual initiative rather than centralized control." The admission hung heavy in the air. Rodriguez's revolutionary tactics had forced the Zephyrians to innovate, and their innovations were proving just as effective as her own. The war had evolved into a deadly game of technological and tactical leapfrog. Captain Chen, recently promoted after the Kepler victory, studied the latest battle reports. "Our casualty rates are climbing again. The new Zephyrian tactics are working, which means we need to evolve again," Rodriguez said firmly. "We can't win this war by fighting the same way forever." Her console chimed with an urgent message from the outer system monitors. Rodriguez opened the transmission and felt her blood run cold. "Admiral, we have a problem. Long-range sensors are detecting a massive Zephyrian fleet approaching the Proxima system. Estimated composition, over 200 ships." The war room fell silent. 200 ships represented the largest enemy force ever assembled. It was 3 times the size of any previous Zephyrian fleet, and it was heading directly for humanity's most important colony world. "Time to intercept?" Admiral Reeves asked. 72 hours at current approach speed, Rodriguez calculated. "But sir, we only have 60 ships available for deployment. Even with our new tactics, those odds are impossible." Admiral Reeves looked around the room at his senior staff. Every face showed the same grim realization. Humanity's greatest victory had led to their greatest challenge. The Zephyrians were no longer underestimating human capabilities. "Recommendations?" he asked. "Evacuation," suggested Captain Williams. "We pull our civilians out of Proxima and abandon the system. It's the only way to save lives." "Absolutely not," Rodriguez said immediately. "If we abandon Proxima, we lose our primary industrial base. The war ends right there." "Then what do you suggest, Commander?" Admiral Reeves asked. "Because conventional tactics won't work against those numbers." Rodriguez stared at the tactical display, her mind racing through possibilities. 200 ships was an overwhelming force, but it was also an opportunity. The Zephyrians had committed everything to this attack, which meant they had vulnerabilities elsewhere. "What if we don't fight them at Proxima?" she said slowly. "Explain." Rodriguez began highlighting different star systems on the galactic map. This massive fleet represents almost every available Zephyrian ship in this sector. They've stripped their other systems to build this force. If we could strike at their home base while they're attacking Proxima, you're talking about leaving Proxima defenseless, Captain Chen observed. "Not defenseless. We leave a small force to conduct hit-and-run attacks. Make them think we're trying conventional defense. Meanwhile, our main fleet strikes at the Zephyrian staging area in the Vega system. Admiral Reeves studied the proposal with growing interest. A simultaneous offensive. Attack their supply base while they're attacking our colony. More than that, Rodriguez continued, her excitement building. The Vega system contains their primary shipbuilding facilities. If we can destroy those, they won't be able to replace the ships they lose at Proxima. We turn their biggest offensive into a strategic disaster. It was a plan of staggering audacity. Rodriguez was proposing to divide their limited forces and launch a deep strike into enemy territory, while their most important colony was under attack. The risk was enormous, but so was the potential payoff. The timing would have to be perfect, Captain Chen noted. If our strike fails, we lose both fleets. If we fight conventionally at Proxima, we lose anyway, Rodriguez replied. At least this way we have a chance to cripple their ability to continue the war. Admiral Reeves was quiet for a long moment, weighing impossible odds against desperate hopes. Finally, he made his decision. Prepare the strike plan, Commander. We'll split the fleet 50-50, 30 ships for the Proxima harassment force, 30 ships for the Vega offensive. Sir, I'd like to lead the Vega strike personally, Rodriguez requested. Absolutely not. You're too valuable to risk on a deep penetration mission. With respect, Admiral, I'm the only one who understands the tactical innovations we'll need to pull this off. The Vega system is heavily defended by automated defense platforms that no one has ever attacked before. I need to be there to adapt our tactics in real time. Admiral Reeves studied his young tactical genius. Rodriguez had grown from an inexperienced academy graduate into the fleet's most innovative commander. But she was still asking to lead what amounted to a suicide mission. The Vega strike will be incredibly dangerous, he warned. So is letting the Zephyrians keep their shipbuilding capacity intact. Sir, if we're going to bet everything on this plan, we need to execute it perfectly. I can't do that from a command center 60 light-years away. The Admiral made his decision. Very well. You'll lead the Vega strike force. But I want detailed contingency plans for every possible scenario. If this goes wrong, I don't want to lose our best tactical mind along with half the fleet. Rodriguez nodded, already beginning to plan an attack that would either end the war or end humanity's hopes in the Kepler sector. She had learned that innovation was humanity's greatest weapon, but innovation required taking risks that no sane military commander would normally consider. Admiral, there's one more thing, she said. For this to work, the Zephyrians have to believe we're fighting conventionally at Proxima. They can't suspect the real attack until it's too late. What do you have in mind? Rodriguez smiled grimly. We're going to make them think they're winning. The next 72 hours would determine whether humanity's greatest tactical gamble would save the war or lose it completely. Rodriguez had proven that inexperience could be an advantage when it led to thinking no experienced officer would attempt. She was about to test that theory against impossible odds. The Vega system's automated defense platforms came online the moment Rodriguez's strike force dropped out of hyperspace. 30 human ships faced a gauntlet of 200 unmanned defense stations, each one equipped with quantum torpedoes and phase cannon arrays that had never been defeated by conventional attack. Contact with enemy defenses, reported Commander Chen from the bridge of the Valiant. They're activating targeting systems across the entire perimeter. Rodriguez studied the tactical display from her command ship, the newly commissioned UES Innovation. The Zephyrian defense grid was a masterpiece of automated warfare, designed to eliminate any attacking force before it could reach the shipyards in the system's inner planets. Analysis complete, she announced to the strike force. The defense platforms operate on a networked artificial intelligence. Unlike their ships, these stations are designed to work together seamlessly. We can't disrupt their coordination because it's hardwired into their systems. Captain Williams, commanding the escort destroyer Fearless, opened a communication channel. So how do we get through them, Commander? Those platforms have overlapping fields of fire that cover every approach vector. Rodriguez had spent weeks studying the Zephyrian defense architecture, looking for weaknesses that traditional tactics couldn't exploit. What she had found wasn't a weakness in their defenses, but a weakness in their thinking. We don't fight the platforms, she announced. We fight the artificial intelligence controlling them. Explain, Admiral Reeves requested from his flagship at Proxima, where his harassment force was beginning its diversionary attacks. Artificial intelligence systems, no matter how sophisticated, operate on predictable logic patterns. They analyze threats, calculate optimal responses, and execute predetermined countermeasures. But they can't adapt to completely irrational behavior. Rodriguez activated her tactical plan, showing the strike force a series of seemingly random movement patterns. We're going to attack in a way that makes no tactical sense whatsoever. Random vectors, impossible formations, attacks that violate every principle of space warfare. Commander Chen studied the proposal with concern. Maya, those movement patterns will expose us to maximum enemy fire. We'll be sitting ducks. Only if the AI can predict our movements and coordinate effective responses. But if we're truly random, if we violate every tactical doctrine the Zephyrians programmed into their systems, the AI will struggle to formulate appropriate countermeasures. It was perhaps the most unconventional battle plan in military history. Rodriguez was proposing to defeat superior technology by embracing chaos and abandoning all tactical logic. The artificial intelligence would expect human behavior to follow predictable patterns. She intended to prove that assumption wrong. All ships begin random approach patterns, she ordered. Remember, nothing you do should make tactical sense. Forget everything you learned at the academy. Fight like you've never seen a starship before. The human fleet scattered across space in a formation that looked like complete madness. Ships moved in spirals, loops, and impossible vectors that exposed them to enemy fire, while providing no obvious tactical advantages. The Zephyrian AI analyzed the approach patterns and found itself unable to predict human movements or coordinate effective responses. Defense. Platform Alpha 7 targeted the destroyer, fearless as it approached in a corkscrew pattern that served no apparent purpose. The AI calculated firing solutions based on conventional evasion maneuvers, but Captain Williams was following Rodriguez's orders to behave irrationally. When the platform fired, its quantum torpedoes passed harmlessly through space where the Fearless should have been, according to logical tactical doctrine. It's working, Williams reported. The platforms can't get a targeting lock. Their firing solutions are based on predictable movement patterns. Rodriguez watched her unconventional strategy unfold with professional satisfaction. The Zephyrian AI was sophisticated enough to handle any conventional attack, but it couldn't process genuinely random behavior. Human unpredictability had become a weapon against artificial logic. Phase 2, she announced. Begin irrational attack patterns. Target systems that provide no tactical advantage. Make every decision the AI wouldn't expect. The human ships opened fire on secondary sensor arrays instead of primary weapon systems. They attacked communication relays that weren't being used and targeted structural components that had no immediate tactical value. Each attack violated established military doctrine so completely that the AI couldn't formulate appropriate responses. Defense Platform Delta 12 attempted to analyze the human attack pattern and found itself locked in processing loops. The enemy was targeting systems in an order that made no logical sense. The AI's tactical subroutines began, conflicting with each other as they tried to predict human behavior that followed no recognizable pattern. Multiple defense platforms are showing processing delays, reported the Innovation Sensor Officer. Their coordination network is experiencing systematic failures. Rodriguez smiled grimly. The AI is trying so hard to understand our tactics that it's overloading its own systems. Continue random attacks. Focus on unpredictability over effectiveness. The battle became a surreal dance of chaos versus logic. Human ships moved in patterns that defied tactical sense, while artificial intelligence struggled to comprehend behavior that violated every military principle in its programming. Gradually, the defense grid began to break down as individual platforms lost coordination with the central AI. Defense perimeter is collapsing, Chen reported. Multiple platforms are going offline. Their targeting systems can't handle our random approach patterns. Rodriguez had proven once again that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't superior technology or numerical advantage, but the ability to think in ways that enemies couldn't anticipate. The Zephyrian AI had been programmed by logical minds that couldn't conceive of deliberately irrational tactics. All ships, proceed to primary targets, she ordered. The shipyards are now within range. The Zephyrian shipbuilding facilities in the Vega system represented decades of construction and trillions of credits in investment. Massive orbital platforms where the Empire's most advanced warships were constructed from the ground up. Rodriguez's strike force emerged from the defense perimeter and began targeting the industrial infrastructure that sustained enemy naval power. The shipyards had no defenses. Beyond the automated platforms, which were still struggling to process the illogical human attack. One by one, the massive construction facilities exploded in brilliant flashes as human weapons found their targets. Primary shipyard destroyed, reported Captain Williams. Secondary facility is taking critical damage. Tertiary construction platform eliminated, added Commander Torres from the heavy cruiser Determination Rodriguez. Watched the destruction with mixed emotions. Each exploding shipyard represented a strategic victory that would cripple Zephyrian naval production for years. But she also knew that similar destruction was likely occurring at Proxima, where Admiral Reeves was fighting a desperate delaying action against impossible odds. All targets eliminated, she announced. Begin withdrawal to Rally Point 7. We're going home. The strike force had accomplished something unprecedented in the war. They had penetrated the most heavily defended system in Zephyrian space and destroyed industrial facilities that couldn't be replaced. But the cost of victory was still being calculated at Proxima, where humanity's most important colony was under siege. Commander, incoming transmission from Admiral Reeves, reported the communications officer. Rodriguez opened the channel, dreading what she might hear. Admiral, report on Proxima situation. Mission accomplished here as well, Commander. The Zephyrian fleet committed to a full assault just as you predicted. Our harassment tactics convinced them we were fighting conventionally, and they exposed their entire force to concentrated attack. We've destroyed or disabled over 60% of their fleet. Rodriguez felt relief flood through her. Both parts of the desperate gamble had succeeded. The Zephyrians had lost their primary shipbuilding capacity and most of their offensive fleet in a single coordinated operation. Casualties? She asked, lighter than expected. Your tactical innovations saved lives on both fronts. The enemy simply couldn't adapt to tactics they'd never encountered before. As the human strike force returned to friendly space, Rodriguez reflected on how far she had come from the inexperienced lieutenant who had reported to the Valiant months earlier. The war was still far from over, but humanity had proven something important. Innovation and unpredictability could triumph over superior technology and numbers. The reports had labeled her inexperienced, and they had been correct. But experience wasn't always an advantage in warfare. Sometimes the greatest victories came from minds that hadn't learned what was supposed to be impossible. The Zephyrian Empire was learning that fighting humanity meant facing an enemy that refused to accept the limitations of conventional thinking. Every defeat taught humans new ways to fight, while every victory made their enemies more predictable.